Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be taking you through the codes and conventions of magazine page design. This is a little bit of a follow-up video to the codes and conventions of magazine front covers video that I did a while back. So they're sort of linking together. The reason why I'm going through this video with you is because you need to be able to understand the typical layout and styles that you would normally expect to find, particularly in double page spreads of magazines, so you can apply this understanding to your own magazine when it comes to making it, as well as doing some textual analysis of various magazine pages. So in this video you're going to be learning the various different elements of magazine page designs. These are the ones I'm going to go through here. I'm not going to go through them all now because I can't bother reading them all out, but what I'm going to do when I'm going through these different terms is I'm going to be relating them to this example double page spread that I made, just so you can sort of visualize the different elements so you know whereabouts they're usually meant to be. So this is what I'm going to be jumping back and forth from the PowerPoint presentation to the actual magazine that I made on InDesign. So these are the things that we're going to be going through. Some of them are really simple, some of them are a bit more complicated, but hopefully by the end of this video you'll get a pretty clear idea of what these different elements are. So the first one, it's not really something that you can see on this particular magazine that I've made, because it's something that is quite specific to different magazines, which is called the house style. Now, the house style, again, is not something that you only see on double page spreads. You will see it on the front covers, you will see it on contents pages, whatever. And the house style it's almost like a consistent style that a magazine will have every single issue, whether it's weekly, monthly. And the idea behind that is you will notice that style and associate it with that magazine. Okay, so if you look at these various magazine covers from Vogue, and you've got Q there, even though these are front pages, and that's not really what this video is about, it's easy to see that these particular magazine covers belong to the same magazine. They all have that very consistent style. They have the consistent things like placements of the masthead and the way that the cover lines are, and even to some extent the shot types as well. There are a couple of ones that are a little bit different, but for the most part you've got a lot of close-ups, medium close-ups. Okay, the Q magazine especially, there's a lot of similarities there between, again, the colours and the placement of the masthead and the shot types as well, the cover lines. They all have that unique brand that readers will associate with that magazine, and it creates that ability for the readership to identify that magazine, that particular brand. It's not just to do with things like the mastheads though. You can look at things like fonts, the font sizes, the actual fonts that they might use for things like their articles, the colours that they use, even things like the actual layout of the content of the magazine. So for example, you might find that for the first 20 pages of a film magazine, they might always have things like reviews. So the actual structure and the way the magazine's put together in terms of the order of the content would also be part of their house style. Things like the language as well that they might use. The use of vocabulary, the use of grammar. Do they use things like slang or colloquialisms, elaborate or restricted code? They might have a particular mode of address that a reader is used to, or a certain level of the language that they might use. All that is part of the house style, so it's not necessarily something that you might consider to be particularly visual. Okay, it's the actual readability of the magazines as well that you need to take into account. Okay, so let's start off with the actual conventions of double page spreads. This one's really easy. The headline or the heading, probably the most important part of the text of the magazine. Okay, you will usually find that the headline is completely separate from the main body of text. You might also sometimes, it's not used on this example here, but you might also find that headlines can sometimes be a completely different font to give it that sense of individuality and that sense of uniqueness. So headlines, very important. They're usually in a much larger font. Position wise as well, you find that they will cover a lot more of the actual double page layout as well. So you can see this one here, it practically covers, and it covers an entire page from left to right pretty much, to give it that impression of importance. And again, it sits at the top of the page, again, to give it that sense of importance. Okay, that's a nice and easy one. Okay, headlines or headings, really simple. Okay, What I will say as well is these terms that we're going to be going through, if you've done media before, you might have heard these as different names because sometimes they might have different terms to them. But it doesn't make a difference, to be honest. So the deck is where the article is introduced. So you should already, based on the work we've done in class, know about stand firsts, and you will find that the deck, which is this little bit of text here that sits underneath the headline, is usually the stand first of the magazine. So it's something that introduces the article. It summarises what the article is going to be about. Like it sets the tone, like it says there. It does still stand out from the main body of text. So you can see here, this one here, it still stands out from the main body, which starts here. Okay, and again, it gives it that sort of sense of importance as well. But it's almost like it's leading the reader to sort of the direction that they're meant to be reading in. Okay, so you know that you're meant to be reading the headline, working your way down through the deck, and then starting down to the main body of text here. Okay, and it almost anchors the headline to the article. Okay, if this wasn't here and you just saw Billie Eilish in big letters there, it wouldn't really give you that sense of what the article is about, and you would have to read the article to know the content of it. Whereas this bit here, it just gives you that little bit of insight. So it says 5 Grammys, 5 MTV Music Awards, New Voice of Bond, the Brit Award, 2 Guinness World Records, blah 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 blah. So you can get the impression by reading this deck here that this is about Billie Eilish's success in 2019 and what she's up to in the future. Okay, just by that deck there. All right. So again, nice and simple. Stylistically, you can find that decks can be in the same style as things like your headlines or your headings, but obviously nowhere near as big. Okay, body copy. This is a nice easy one. Body copy basically means the main portion of text on the article. So that's not on the article, on the pages. So all this black text here is what we call the body copy. Okay, you will usually, and again this is obviously down to a stylistic choice, but it's more common that you would find text for a body copy to be a serif font. Okay, so you can see here you've got a pretty obvious serif font. I can't remember what font is it. Times New Roman? Garamond. Okay, never mind. So you can see that most body copy text is written in a serif font. You will find some magazines that are a little bit unique that will use a sans serif font for the main body, but it's more traditional that you'd expect it to be in a serif font. Normally as well, you'd find it around about between 10 and 12 for the font size, but again that depends on the actual font that you use, because some fonts are easier to read. Some fonts have different sizes, so a font that's in size 10 might be a different size than a font that's also in size 10, but the way it's written makes it look bigger or smaller, if that makes sense. So it depends on what sort of font that you use. Colours as well will also change on what the background colour is, because you might, for example, have an image that takes up the entire screen that is very, very dark, therefore you need a lighter font to read it. So the colour can change, but more commonly you'd find it usually black on a lighter background or white on a darker background. Obviously as well, you might notice that this little bit in the corner here, you can see that the body copy of the text wraps around the image, and that's a stylistic choice that it will be used in most magazines, because you don't want any text that belongs to the main body to be blocking images or be blocked by images, because obviously that defeats the point of it. It makes it more tricky to read. So you will find that most magazines, if they have an image like this, in which Billie Eilish's arm and shoulder there sort of get in the way of the text, you will find that the text wraps around it there. So you can see how it curves around there, so it doesn't block any of the important elements of the picture, making the text potentially difficult to read. And that's also an issue as well, because say for example you've got a particularly light image on a black background, then you've got the problem of what colour text do you use, because half of the text will be on a dark background, but half of it will be in a white background, and you don't want to have two different colours for your text, for your main body text, because that'll make it really, really difficult to read. Okay, and obviously it's all about the reader, okay, making it easy for them. Okay, what else have we got? Okay, this is a nice easy one. Columns, guttering and bleed. Now we did do a little bit on guttering and bleed when we looked at the magazine front cover, but columns, nice and simple, all body copy text is in columns. Okay, you'd usually find between 3 and 4 columns per page, but I suppose it all depends on the actual size of the images that you want to use on there. If you've got quite a big image that can go across 2 pages, which is not unheard of, you will only have room for 2, maybe 3 columns. Okay, but more commonly you wouldn't really see any more than 4, because don't forget, magazines are printed in A4 paper, so for you to have 5 columns on there, that's going to make it very, very cramped. So between 3 and 4 is what you'd normally expect to find on there. The guttering is the space between the columns, so this little bit here, okay, is the guttering. Okay, just again, there's no real reason for that, it's just a technical term. Okay, obviously you don't want to make sure that your guttering is too small, that it makes the text look cramped and it sort of gives the impression that the columns are merged together, but you don't want to make them too big that it wastes a lot of space. Okay, and bleed, like you already know because we did it on magazine front cover pages, is the space between the body copy and the edge of the page. Okay, so this little space here. You'd usually find that the bleed is much bigger than the actual guttering itself. Okay, so that one is, I can't remember how big I set that, a couple of millimeters at least, and that one's about 1 centimeter, give or take. So it's usually much bigger, the space between the bleed compared to the guttering. Oops. Okay. Drop capitals. This is a nice simple one. So a drop capital is this, essentially this B here. Okay. A drop, the idea behind a drop capital, it's called a drop capital because it's a capital letter that drops into the article itself, and essentially it's just a way for the reader to easily find where the article starts. You only have a drop capital right at the very start of the article for the very, very first one. You don't put it halfway through on a second page. It's just where the article starts. Okay. You will also find that drop capitals will be very contrasting in terms of style compared to the main body copy. So what I've done for this one is I've used a completely different B. Well, it's the B in the same font style that I've used for the headline and the deck. Okay, to give it that sort of stylistic consistency. So yeah, it marks the beginning of the article for the reader. It sort of makes it feel a little bit less cluttered, okay? But a lot of it is down to stylistically and to make it easy for the reader to know where the article starts, okay? A lot of magazines get really creative with how they use their drop capitals. I remember, I think it was Q magazine a while back, they used to do a feature that would have the entire left page would be a drop capital. So, for example, if it was this entire page would be one massive B. Okay, it was a little bit clunky, but it was, quite nice for a little bit, then it got a bit old. Anyway, so drop capital, nice and simple. Okay, open letter of the body copy, it drops into the article. You normally find that most drop capitals will take up between 3 or 4 lines of text, give or take. They don't usually get any bigger or smaller than that. Okay, so we've got page numbers and folios. Now, this one's very, very important. So page numbers and folios, they always sit on the outside corners of pages. So this bit here is your page numbers and your folios. Folios is basically any information that sits in the bottom outside corner of your page. So you can see here, I've got the masthead of the magazine, NME, I've got the page number, and I've got the date there. Okay. Now the reason why it's in the outside corner of the pages, again, you got to look at it from the point of view of the reader. If you're, say, looking in the contents pages of a magazine and you want to find and you notice that you want to read an article that's on page 24, you can then just flick through the corner of the pages and find page 24. If it was on the inside corner, these 2 pages here, then you'd have to open each page individually, which would be a bit of a pain if you're trying to find page 140 or something like that. Okay. You also always need to remember that when you're doing page numbers, even numbers will go on the left page and odd numbers will go on the right of the page here. Oops. And that's because technically the front cover of a magazine is always classed as page 1. Okay, even though it doesn't have a page number on there, it will always class as page 1. So you're always going to get even numbers on the left and odd numbers on the right. Okay, you'd be surprised how many people make that mistake when they're making their magazines. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily have to be things like the mastheads that go in your folios. Okay, it could be I don't know, a quote from the magazine. It could be the actual headline of the magazine itself, the article itself. Okay, it could be the month, it could be the issue number, it could even be the website. Some magazines will have the website of the magazine in the bottom corner as well. Okay, but for this one, I've sort of pastiched the enemy style, and they just do the masthead, the page number, and the date. I'd probably say the masthead and the page numbers are the two aspects of folios that are consistent in most magazines. Okay, especially obviously page numbers. I think that's pretty much it you need to know about folios and page numbers. Yeah, they always sit in the outside corner is the main thing you need to know about anyway. Okay, running heads are not that common, but they're more common in bigger, more mainstream magazines. And it's essentially a navigation element. Okay, so you'll see I've got this little red box at the top here that says cover story. Okay, and again, that's just a nice, simple, easy way for readers to navigate through the magazine. Okay, obviously with it being a cover story, it's probably very likely that people will buy this magazine just to read this article on Billie Eilish. So it makes sense to make it easier for them to find. Okay, so that's why you'll have a big box in the top, almost insanely contrasting to the rest of the article. So you can see here I've used a really bright red colour to give it that sort of contrast to make it easier to find compared to the rest of it. So you'll see that if I'd done it in white with orange, it may have blended into the actual design itself and be a bit more difficult to spot. Because I did it in red, it creates that contrast and makes it easier to spot and easier for the reader to navigate. So it allows the reader to easily find certain articles or certain sections. So I know, for example, Empire magazine, for their entire review section where they review new movies and TV shows, they will have a big red box for every page that says reviews, 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 reviews. Okay, to make it easier for them to find, for the reader to find it. You won't necessarily find that it does this for all the sections of a magazine. It's usually for sections that are more important, so like your cover stories, or the more popular sections of magazines. You wouldn't necessarily have it for things like readers' letters or competitions, maybe. Okay, it would be the parts of the magazine that are consistently important. Okay, so running head sits at the top, and it allows a bit of a navigation passage, I suppose you can call it, for the reader to help them find the more popular sections of a magazine or the more important sections. Okay, byline, nice and simple one. Okay, a byline is who the article and the images is by. Okay, hence byline. Alright, so you'll most commonly find the byline to sit underneath the deck. Not necessarily. You might find some that have it at the end of articles, but for me it makes more sense to put it here, because then the writer gets a credit before you start writing it. Okay, because it's more likely people are going to read it if it's before the start of the main body copy. So you'd find credits for the text, so who wrote it. So Alan Writer wrote this one. Very creative name there. And the image is from Rachel Luna at Getty Images, copyright as well. Okay, you might find that some articles will have the same writer for the text and the same photographer for the images, so it could be both by Alan Writer. And again, you'd put both names there. You put text and images at the top there. Okay. I've also separated them here with little black arrows, lines on top and underneath it to give it that sort of sense of importance, to separate it a little bit. That's pretty much it, to be honest. Yeah, and you probably also find that writers who have got a bit more fame or a bit more reputation will be at the start of the article, whereas less well-known writers may be at the end. Okay, that depends on their sort of reputation, I suppose. Yeah, that's pretty much it, to be honest. So, bylines, who the article's by, text and images. Okay, captions. Now, with captions, this links to Roland Barthes' theory of anchorage that we've looked at already. So you all know that anchorage is how two or more elements combine together to create meaning, okay? And that's essentially what captions are. So you'll see on this image here of Billie Eilish, you've got this little white box underneath that has a little sentence that says Eilish and the hologram she collected earlier in the year, okay? And it sounds really, really simple, but that text and the image combine together to give us that sense of Eilish being successful, which is what the article is about. Okay, so that's essentially what these little boxes are as well. Okay, these captions, they create that anchor. So what does this one say? It says, what does 2020 hold for 18-year-old Eilish? Again, it summarizes the point of the article. Okay, it tells us what this image means. Okay, it means that this person is successful and she's presumably going to be even more successful in the future. Okay, if it said something else, it would give us a different meaning completely. Okay, depending on the context of the article. Again, stylistically, you would normally find that the captions are written in black text over the top of a white box, regardless of the image. That might change depending on the color of the image, but it's more likely to be this particular style. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much it, to be honest. Okay, nice and simple on that one. Oops, I missed one there. Okay, pull quotes. Nice, easy one. So a pull quote is a quote that has been pulled from the article, hence the name pull quote. Okay, you see what they did there. Usually you will find that pull quotes are quotes that are quite, not necessarily shocking, but quite sort of mysterious or, you know, dramatic or exciting. And the idea behind a pull quote is to make it stand out and contrast from the main body and draw people in and make them more inclined to read the article. Okay, so it might be something that is a little bit enigmatic. It might ask a question. Okay, it might make the reader think, oh, okay, why is that? I want to read that. I want to find out more about that. So this one here, so as soon as I heard the words Bond theme, I was like, I'll do it. So again, it's quite an exciting quote. It's like, oh, Bond song, okay. Well, I didn't know she was doing that. Let me read about this Bond song that she's going to be doing. All right. So stylistically, the pull quote would need to contrast from the article because the purpose of it is to get the reader's attention. So again, for this one, I've used the same text, the same font style and color as the deck and the headline. Again, to give it that sense of consistency, but also to make it stand out. Okay, and to make it more contrasting with the body copy of the text. Okay, and it instantly stands out. As soon as you go towards this page, your eyes are drawn towards the headline, the deck, and the pull quote. Okay, and that pull quote is designed to encourage you to read the rest of the article. Okay, you see it a lot on things like, you know, headlines as well, I suppose. Sometimes headlines can be pull quotes. Okay, a lot of people also say if you've got a pull quote here, does it need to be in your article? And yes, it does. Okay, because the pull quote is just a duplication of this particular article. It doesn't necessarily need to be an actual quote as well. So, for example, this one is a quote. Well, it's a quote I made up from Billie Eilish, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, it can be any sentence from the article. Okay, it doesn't necessarily need to be a quote from someone because you're quoting the article, not a quote from the article, if that makes sense. Okay, if it doesn't make sense, let me know and I'll try and explain it a bit better than this. Okay. So you've got interesting enigmatic quotes, sits apart of the body copy, I've explained that, and quotes specifically chosen to pique the interest of the reader and encourage them to read on. Okay. Again, you will also notice that like this image is wrapped around, the text wraps around the image, the text will wrap around the pull quote as well. So say, for example, I get bored and I go, I want to move that over there. The text, it didn't work. There we go, it's sort of done it a little bit, never mind, I'll go back. The text still wraps around the image, okay? So you can see that it says here, Interscope Records subsidiary starts again there. So it works around the quote. Okay, subheads. This one again, nice and simple one. Okay, it's something that's designed to make the process of reading the article easy for the reader. Okay, if you're reading a magazine, you don't want it to feel like a slog when you're reading it. So a lot of magazines will use these things here called subheads. And the subhead, essentially, it's a subheading, okay, which I'm not going to go through because I'm sure you all know what a subheading is, okay, because, you know, you do that at primary school, essentially. So, subheads are often used to make the article easy to read for the reader. And again, stylistically, it's the same sort of principle in the sense that I've used a consistent style in regards to the same fonts and the same text as the heading, the deck, and the pull quote. Again, gives it that consistency. Stylistically, what you don't want for any particular house style is too much variations of font sizes. Okay. So I would always stick for your important parts of text, like your headline, like your deck, like your pull quotes, your subheads. I would always stick with the same style. It makes it easier for you, but also it gives it that consistent style that you want. It gives it that consistency, okay? And it makes it easy for the reader to read. If you've got a million different fonts on there, it's going to give the reader a panic attack trying to figure out, you know, the purpose and why they're all, you know, different style, which you don't want, okay? So give it consistency, same font styles for the various different elements. You don't have to, but I would highly recommend it. Yeah, again, obviously it needs to stand out from the body copy, okay? It needs to give it that sense of importance that the subheading is, okay? And it needs to summarise what the actual section of the article is about. So you might have noticed if you're, you know, understand these things that I've extended. This is just the, you know, this is just the Wikipedia page of Billie Eilish. So all I've done here is for each of these subheads is just the subheadings from the Wikipedia page. Okay. Right. I think that's it. Is that it I need to go through? Yeah, it is. Okay. So I'm pretty sure I've gone through all of these now. Yep, I have. So what you need to make sure that you do is that you familiarise yourself with all of these key terms. You first of all need to understand these terms so you can apply them to your magazine. But for any written work that you do to go with the magazine, you need to be using these key terms regularly, okay? Because you need to show that you understand these terms. And using consistent media language, which all these things are, is a great way to push your work up to that higher merit distinction level, okay? So familiarise yourself with the terms. Make sure you know them, make sure you can identify them so you can get used to using them consistently, so that using these terms almost becomes second nature to you, okay? That is pretty much it for the page layout and design conventions. I don't think there's anything, if there's anything that didn't make sense or you want to go through in a bit more detail, or if anything that I explained that I didn't explain very well, send me an email, come and see me, and I'll try and go through it a bit better. But I think for what I've gone through, it's pretty straightforward. One thing I will say though is that all these things here, these aren't necessarily rules that you have to stick with, okay, for your double page spreads. However, these are ones that are very, very commonly found, okay? You don't necessarily need to stick to those rules. However, if you want to do something a bit different, there needs to be a reason behind it, okay? So you don't have to have running heads on there. You don't have to have things like, I don't know, pull quotes in there or subheadings, okay? But conventionally, those are the things you would expect to see there, okay? So, you know, take that into consideration when you're planning your magazine pages, okay? But like I said, if anything doesn't make sense, send me an email and I'll go through things better if I need to. But that's pretty much it.